Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back here on the industry stage at the Formnext 2024. And if you were watching carefully and you listened to Sherry's presentation, you have heard that we don't have to see sustainability only in an environmental perspective, but also in different perspectives. And this is what we want to do here at the panel. And therefore, I invited guests and experts from totally different areas. Let me introduce to you my guests. So, we have Professor Dr. Christian Arns. At the very beginning, Professor at the University of Applied Sciences, Aachen. Christian, good to have you.
Great to be here.
Then we have Markus Eriksson, who is Senior Researcher at RISE Mobility and Systems. Is that correct, Markus?
Yeah.
That's cool. Then you just heard a fantastic presentation, by the way. Dr. Sini, your last name is really hard to pronounce. Metsäkottalainen.
Very good.
That's good. You are Head of Ecosystems and Senior Ecosystem Lead at DIMECC. It's DIMECC Oy. And to my left, Sherry Monroe, already presented Executive Director of the Additive Manufacturer Green Trade Association. Sherry, good to have you here.
Great to be here.
Christian, you are the most neutral person here on this panel, so this is why I assume. So this is why we start. So the other three are strictly focusing on sustainability. You are not, kind of not, yeah? So I ask you, how important is sustainability in the student education and how big is the interest on the other side?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I personally believe it is extremely important. But it is also not so easy to teach it because it is like touching every bit of the technical studies and every part of the things that we talk about during studies and that we try to teach. So we decided actually some years ago that we would not go into having singular topics like one or two modules on sustainability.
Okay.
But we were looking into integrating the topic of sustainability on the ecological level, but also on all those other aspects like social aspects and also security aspects and things like these, and try to introduce them into every single module, because all of the topics that we are talking about are, let's say, relevant in order to come to a global sustainable solution.
Yeah, sorry, in your answer, Christian,
Yeah.
before you finish,
Yeah.
I already hear some problems in definition, and that's what you tackled today, Sherry, yeah? So it's not that easy to, let's say, describe sustainability, and
Absolutely.
Everybody has a different understanding. What is the understanding you have, and how do you incorporate that? Because you said we are tackling all the different perspectives, right?
Yeah, so I would say that in the end we have global challenges, and many of them touch the different aspects of sustainability. We believe that only we have to think about solutions, and many of the solutions are technical. This is what we can talk about. There are other parts of the problem which we cannot really touch on a maybe more political level or things like these. But from a technical perspective, there are many possibilities. AM is going into this direction in many areas, and this is what we try to bring into it. So in a certain way, every time that you think of a technical system, do not only start by technical specifications, but directly start by how does it influence sustainability on all levels. This is maybe the most important thing.
And what I really liked, first, Sherry mentioned that it's not only about always environmental, but also saving resources. And we should not forget, this was the basic thought when sustainability came up as a word.
Yeah.
It was about saving the forest and the amount of wood we have, and not cut more than we need, basically. That was the initial thought. So, Sini, and you mentioned the three dimensions that should always be considered, and not only one. Coming to you, so looking a little bit at the Finnish manufacturing ecosystem, how do you push the topic inside your members? How is that pushed from your side? And are there already some key successes? I mean, you're doing the LCA, similar to AMGTA, but this is like in a very early stage, but what are like really successes in terms of sustainability already?
Yeah, if I start from your first question, so what we can do in FAME and what are the actions we are doing in FAME. So if you were listening to my presentation, I showed you our sustainability aim roadmap. So we have quite clear vision where we want to go, and we have developed a path to go there and reach all the targets that we have defined for us. But that is not an easy route for us, even we are, let's say, fostering the topic, and we have been fostering the topic quite a long time, and especially in Finland. But I think that's good that we already have this kind of definition and the path that's where we want to go. And I think that the successes of this year have been this training organized for our members. So they now know the basics on sustainability things and about different kind of LCA tools and how to make this assessment, what to take into account, what are the constraints there. So I think this kind of knowledge increase, it's very important topic there. And then we always try to make everything quite tangible for our members to really understand the things. So that's why we are doing these showcases. I presented in my presentation a couple of those ones. If you weren't there, you can see the showcases in Finnish pavilion. But just to make it tangible, that what are the differences between conventional methods and AM methods. So very important topics. But then, what are the success stories? A very good question. I think that our success at the moment is coming from there that if we are really calculating the environmental impacts of AM, we are getting quite, let's say, good numbers in Finland, and it's based on the energy that we have green electricity in use, and I think that's the thing that we do have at the moment. That's very good for us, and of course I'm looking forward that it's more common to other countries as well in the forthcoming years that they can also be this kind of green energy and base the production on that.
Difficult political situation, and we won't raise that topic. There are a few countries like yours and ours, sorry, where it might get difficult in the near future. But thank you so much, Tine. Markus, the funny thing is when we got known to each other, you explained where you're coming from. And this is really something that Sherry mentioned today, or in our final question round, we're talking about transportation, and you have a background in truck business, basically. That's the funny thing. But today, let's talk about today. What role do institutes like RISE play in bridging the gap between like innovation, in sustainability? There are so many ideas and things, but bring it into practical application in manufacturing. So what is your part in that?
Yeah. Well, we look upon it as a journey. And then you need to meet your partners where they are in this journey. Are they in the beginning or have they come far? And depending on where they are, then of course you need to approach them with different means. If we were talking about AM, initially it's about training and getting to know the limitations of the technology, etc. But then, of course, from there you can start to test and practice. So we have testing facilities where you can start to build your knowledge around that, to explore the possibilities. And then when you start to find your applications, of course, then you want to scale. But as you know, scaling costs money. And what do you need then? You need a business case. Yeah. And so a business case is one area where many of our members today are struggling because they want to scale their initiatives. Yeah. And then they need to calculate on more aspects than just to cut cost. So sustainability is one parameter that they have been asking us for support to develop methods to quantify from a sustainability, but also, as Sherry has been talking about, on what is the value of time, what is the value of availability. So, and then of course, it's much about facilitation too. So after a while, they start to excel. And then it's more bringing people together and let the magic happen. So that is how I see then the role of RISE and how we can support our partners to grow into this.
Yeah. And that's what I really like, and there I see the connection to your presentation, Sherry. I mean, let's talk honestly here. We need a business case behind it, and that's the funny thing. If you're talking about sustainability, that's why I loved your three-dimensional aspect. We're always talking about environmental things, and that's like the common understanding. But in the end, it must be finance, and it must be feasible on an economic scale. But when you look then into additive manufacturing, there comes the magic, like saving warehouse space, saving transportation, stuff like that, saving material use. These are all things that really push also the business case into a positive direction, basically, Sherry. That's it, or?
Absolutely. And I think the more we can get those complete business cases, that's, we were just talking a minute ago, companies aren't adverse to implementing new technologies. They don't mind change. They just don't like uncertainty. They want to know what this is going to do for them and how it's going to impact them. And, in the U.S. in particular, you can't talk about sustainability by itself. The first question is what's it going to cost? So by tracking those together and seeing that they really do track together, they're not at odds. If you're saving money on energy and on material and on all these things, you're saving money, but you're also saving environmental impact, although it quite often is not getting captured, because if your objective is money, which is fine, these other benefits are happening that maybe just aren't being accounted for.
Yeah, that's a funny thing that we don't take that into consideration, because sustainability would often lead to money saving at the same time. So that's a funny thing. Christian, I mean, you are researching in how to save material, how to save energy, how to optimize the technology, how to reduce cycle times, whatever it is. It's all in your research field and your educational field. Where is the biggest the biggest chance of doing something for sustainability? Where do you see the focus right now?
I think the most important thing is to see the business cases, as you said, holistically. I think this is the most important thing. In nearly every case that I saw which was successful, there were certain parts of it where you have to invest more. Sometimes even more resources, more money anyway. So it's an old story talking about life cycle costs and things like these. I have a strong background in the tooling industry, and it is always the same. You can invest more in a very good tool, and you will save so much money later in the production itself. Or you just look at the initial price of the tool, and you will definitely not save anything later.
Yeah.
And it's always the same story. So you have to accept that there is a part of the whole value chain, which you look at, where you have to invest more. But if you look at the whole thing, and there AM is a big facilitator to do so. If you look at the whole thing, if you take distribution into it, if you take reduced overproduction into it, sometimes if you take raw material into it, you will save something. If you look at the design of the parts, all these things are extremely important, but there always is a part of the story where you have to invest more.
Yeah.
And if we just consider this part, in many cases that's it, because the broader view is not there. If you just look at this part, you will always say, okay, it's not a case, it's not a business case, because I have to invest more.
Yeah.
But you have to see where you're
and here is a part of the dilemma, because I mean we have many different actors in a supply chain. So let's say that actor number 2 are investing in longevity or increased durability of a part. Who is going to benefit from that investment?
Right.
Is it the person doing the investment, or is it someone else? And here you need to bring your investment and also the cashing in into the same wallet, because otherwise, why should you do that investment?
Yeah.
So that is a part of the challenge here, then to work within the system that we have today.
And furthermore, I mean, as you said, there's a whole process chain behind it, a whole, let's say, money increasing business case behind it, where probably, let's say, airplanes, where you had this part in your speech. Let's say we reduce the amount of being repaired. Then it's good for the airline, it's good for the producer of the part, but it's bad for all the service providers in the world. They wouldn't push it, I assume.
But here I see there's a great benefit of AM, where as a manufacturing technology, it is quite different compared to the other ones, because it has a potential to change how we do things, to change our processes. And one term that I'm really fond of is supply chain compression, because it starts to push the supply chain, making it smaller, leaner, and meaner, which also solves a part of that challenge, that the one who's making the investment is also making the profit. So there I see that AM as a process changer is a great or enabler.
But let's talk quickly about feasibility, okay? Because you mentioned this example with the 12,000 pieces compared to the 1,000 per month. So my question would be, we are talking about industrialization all the time here at the fair. But are we at that point? Because we talked about the traditional thinking of we need to produce in order to get it cheap.
Right.
More pieces, cheaper product. That's basically the traditional thinking. So if we are able to produce the same amount with additive manufacturing in not the same, but at least an acceptable amount of time, then that would be a business case. But are we at that point? Is that, if you do the LCAs, you see, okay, we can compare it, or is it still, you have to take other aspects into consideration?
Yeah, well, I think one of the challenges there too is you can look at an individual part and say, oh, we could do this differently. But if you're building an entire assembly, are the other parts being managed in a similar way? And so how do you move that along? You know, that one part may last longer, but if it's part of an assembly that has to be changed out more frequently, you may have benefit that you're not even getting any value out of. So it really, but if you can make the case for it as a example part, then they may say, okay, well, now we see the benefits around this. Let's adopt more so that we can actually push it forward. But yeah, but this is the way technology and innovation always goes, right? This is the way it happens, and it's bumpy and
it's a change in thinking, and that's would be my next question to you. So if there is a country that puts focus on sustainability in whatever dimension we are talking about it, okay? So, and we need this thinking in AM, which we discussed yesterday heavily, yeah? So forget about thinking in traditional way and try to replace something, start thinking in AM. Is that happening then more easily in Finland, for example, because they're thinking directly in the aspects of sustainability, and AM is the most logical solution? Is that something you observe or not? Not at all.
Really, really difficult question to answer, but it might be so. And I have noticed that people working in the AM area, those are very clever people, and I think that we are having certain creativity in all of we do. So it might be so, but yeah, I think it depends finally on the case.
Yeah.
And I would highlight that AM is still one manufacturing technology. There are plenty of other ways to manufacture as well. So it is definitely for all. So we should manufacture only utilizing AM. So we need to find the business cases. Also, we need to find the cases that where we can highlight the sustainability, for example. But
but there we need success stories, right?
Yeah, indeed.
I would like maybe to add one thing. So I always said, don't think in AM, think in part functionality.
Yeah.
And reduce, let's say, the limits that we have been teaching engineers for many years, and we have tried to stop teaching them. Also, AM has limits, but they are completely different. So start thinking the functionality of the part, and then think about which is the best technology or process chain to make the part. And in many cases it's AM, but in many cases it's not. We have many cases where, for example, we we started, or we reduced this small area of possibilities by saying, okay, we could do it by AM. It was designed in a completely different way, and in the end it was a fine casting part, for example. So there are many other technologies which you can use depending on the amount of parts that you have to make and all these things. But AM is a great facilitator to reduce the early limits for thinking in functionality of a part.
Yeah.
And we see many examples here which are like this, where in many cases I would say, okay, if you go into a serial production, maybe it's not AM anymore, but that's not the problem.
Yeah, but probably it's part
like
of the solution to get there, right?
It is a big facilitator of the solution.
And you have a very interesting consequence of what you're saying here, because I mean, on the inside of the incoming material. So if you do what you just said, then of course it will have an impact on the material that you're requiring, and also the number of sub-supplier that you need, which is an example of this supply chain compression. That
Absolutely.
you don't have to do those inbound transports anymore. You don't need to have all those different sizes of material in your stock in order to produce that particular. You can reduce the complexity there, and that is just on the inbound side.
And I think you can also do a little bit of just a mental exercise. Instead of saying, you know, if I want to print this, is this a good candidate to be printed? Just as a sort of exploratory thing, say, under what circumstances would it make sense to print this? Our board chair, Brian Neff, always says, you know, printing a fork that you eat with would be a terrible use of additive. And then I joke with him, I say, well, unless you're on the space station and you need a fork, you know, like there are instances in any part where somebody would say, this is not a viable candidate for additive. Well, it might be under certain circumstances, and what might be the, you know, remote location or the supply chain issues, or in what circumstances would it make sense to make this part? Because then you start looking at it just from a different perspective, and you come at it, and it can be very informing of just how you approach this and find those right applications, because it's very application specific, but it's not just the part, it's all those circumstances around it. So there's a lot of ways to look at it.
But that's the next question I have. Isn't it also a matter of the objective that is behind, which brings us probably back to sustainability? So defining the objective you want to achieve, let's say I want to use the bottle in the spaceship, that's an easy case, because then you need a 3D printing machine. Otherwise you won't have a fork on the space station. That would be the next question. If the objectives remain the same, save cost by any means, then it's hard to transfer the thinking into a new dimension, right? So, and my question to you, Christian, you can answer it right away, is are we able to remodule the thinking with education, for example?
I think there's one important thing to know. In many of the traditional businesses that we do, we think that we make it the cheapest way, but we don't. Definitely not, in many, many cases. Because those distributed, long, let's say, many different players we have in the supply chain, everyone tries to make the best out of it for himself, but we don't really have the transparency what would be, let's say, the globally best solution for a part. And I think my point is, we have to think about transparency. We have to think about data in the end, about better understanding what is the benefit, also in terms of cost. In the end, it will only work by cost. If we talk about sustainability and we say, okay, it's the more sustainable part, maybe we get a really small portion of the markets where people are extremely aware of it and so on. That's nice, but it's more story. Let's say the business part of it is to save cost. But there are many examples where we do this, but we have, again, to look at the global thing. So I'm really convinced that we are able to do so, but we have to also change the thinking in the industry, not only in terms of technology, but also in the way that cost is defined.
That would result in the importance of creating standards in LCA assessment, or in life cycle assessment, because if you want to have transparency, you need to have comparable figures. Otherwise, as we could see in your chart, Cindy, I mean, if I would observe it as a manager of a company, I would say, hey, don't get me wrong, as long as these 4 figures are different, I'm not interested in. That's a little bit the point. But Marcus, I want to, because you said we are reducing the number of suppliers or decreasing the supply chain a little bit. Wouldn't you think that there are a lot of challenges to achieve that, because there are so many that don't want this? So are there already some experience?
I said that there was a consequence.
Yeah.
If you design for AM, you get a consequence, and that consequence is that if you are reducing the number of parts in a function from 50 to 10, then you will have 40 less parts that needs to be shipped, produced, etc., etc. That is just a pure consequence. So there's nothing that anyone can do about that if you take that path. But what I've seen when it comes to this, how do you calculate the gains and the business case around AM? If we take many of the big companies that I'm working with, then we have the R&D department, we have the manufacturing department, we have the logistic department, we have the aftermarket department. So taking back this question about who is getting the gain out of this chain, now you're still within the same company, but it's different departments. Is it the manufacturing guys who are measured and their salary is depending on how successful they are? Or is it the aftermarket people who is measured on the availability and the sales? And coming back to this with time, because that is one key factor that we have found where you can find a lot of value, both from a sustainability perspective, but also from an economical point of view, is to cut lead time, especially in global companies then. And that's why I'm so super interested in decentralized production, which is then possible with AM and other technologies, I might say.
So the funny thing is, before we come to a different topic of sustainability, my question to you is, I work a lot with C-level managers that have to decide about introducing a new technology. And wherever I am, of course, I tackle additive manufacturing. So if you're addicted, of course, you bring it up. And the answer is always the same. So no, our technology cannot be replaced with it, or we can't produce that much parts in that time, or quality is still not good enough, etc. So many. I don't want to say prejudices, but probably it is. So what is the key factor to convince those guys? Because, we can talk about sustainability as long as we want, and between us, we can exchange success stories and business case, whatever we want, as long as you don't get the C-level members on board saying, yeah, I trust in AM to be one possible solution, not the only one. So what are you doing? I mean, you're working in organization, bringing together members, industry members. How do you convince them? Please give me an answer. This would be awkward. This would be an awkward moment in our panel if we stop now.
We'll find one.
Okay, stop it. No, Sherry,
I think being able to give them reliable information that they can trust, that is complete, that's applicable for them, and they understand how this will impact their flow, and help them be able to see all those impacts, like you said, whether it's different companies or different departments within a company. Everybody's got their little area that they want to protect, and so you really have to be able to communicate that. And it's like change management in any other way. How do you roll that out within a company? How do you get buy-in? How do you have confidence that this is going to work? I think you run into those same things, but reliable information that you can trust, I think, is the biggest part of it.
And you probably need, sorry, Christian, one question.
Yeah, maybe just one additional idea. I'm really a technology guy, but today I think I would not start talking about the benefits of AM. I would start maybe asking the question, do you want to reduce your stocks? And also, do you want to make your parts better than those of the others in a certain way? Do you want to have kind of a competitive advantage by better parts? Start thinking about that, and then you can maybe find one of the solutions in AM. I don't know if it works.
I can tell you, I do that. I know. The thing is, 1 second, Marcus. The thing is that they won't believe you, because you know what? We are telling them that for 20 years now. That's a little bit the problem, and there are too few real successful business cases. They're coming now in a really high speed, so we are getting more and more of those. But as far as I remember, we are talking too often about the benefits, and they are not showing up. That's a little bit the problem. But Marcus, please.
Yeah, but it's a little bit like, how do you win the Olympics?
Yeah.
How do you stand and be number one there? And of course, it is a long journey.
Yeah.
And it always starts with some dedicated innovator, you know, some person who really believes that I can change the world with AM, for example. That's where it starts, in the most cases. And then you have to build, as I was mentioning earlier, you need to build knowledge around that. You need to have this training, practice, piloting, and then you need to come to that point where you need to start to do the math and calculate and change language. Because often these people are very into the technology, etc. So what I'm trying to say here is that you don't do that in a day, in one presentation. Usually you have to build it up. And then, for example, having showcases, having a factory where you have implemented all these thoughts, and you have people talking about how excellent this is. This is not the PowerPoint I'm talking about. It's someone...
It's 101.
So I have been trying to implement excellent ideas, and I had an enemy in that management group. And so I didn't know how to come around him. And, well, I'm a Swede, so we were in Sweden. But then he went to the US. He visited our factory where we had implemented all these ideas, and he was talking to the American guys. I don't know, there was not so many women there, so but unfortunately. But then he came back, and he became my best friend. And I thought, wow.
Yeah, sometimes you need another...
What happened there?
Another perspective.
But what happened was that he came, he saw, and he was talking to people, and he started to believe. So I think that having pilots and practice is a key to drive the change. And then, of course, you need the numbers. That's the fact base, the paper that the person will point at and say, well, this is what my ground for this decision. But I think that visit in that factory was the real reason why they changed.
Great example. So you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I would continue. Very, very good points. But also, I think this is one thing that's where this kind of ecosystem can help. So message coming from expert to expert, and also finding those companies who are tackling with the same problems. So finding the solutions together, and also taking the message to these C-level guys. So I think. We do believe in collaboration in that sense also.
I mean, it's what makes... Sorry, I have a question for you, so that might fit.
Yeah.
Just one comment. So what I think makes it sometimes difficult, you don't... If it comes to sustainable in general, you don't want to talk too much about the negative consequences, because we hear them every day, like 24/7. So you want to talk about the positive outcome, and the positive outcome is much more attractive to any person. So this would lead to my question, probably combines with the thing you want to say. I mean, I know you know for a few years, and I saw the progress, and I think you have much more ammunition at the very beginning, because at your first presentation at Formnext, you were just explaining how to approach the process of LCA. Now we are much further in the progress.
Sure.
So what are what is the situation today from your perspective?
Well, I think to all of these points, you know, doing the research, the LCAs, the business use case stories, which is quite often more about painting a picture than just the numbers. But we also, you know, for us, for me, you know, I'm here at an AM event to talk about sustainability, but we're also doing other events that are broader manufacturing and sustainability events to talk about additive manufacturing. Like, we can talk about it all we want here, but we need to be doing more where we're talking to other groups and telling them real use case stories, which is what we're doing as well. And for some of our members, it would not make sense for them to go, you know, a powder producer to go to a general manufacturing or sustainability show and try to explain additive just so they can talk about their product. But we can go, I think, to your point with the networks or the, you know, ecosystems, and go and be able to represent your membership and say, let me tell you what additive could do for your business. Let me show you a case of design for additive, of part consolidation and better durability, better management of your inventory, compression of your supply chain, where you can say, let me show you these examples and create that interest that, you might not be talking very technical, but you can get interest throughout an organization. Maybe the finance people say, wait a minute, we can manage, we cannot have all that capital tied up in inventory. I need to know more about this. Tell me about this. How do we do this? What would that mean for us? So then you're starting to get, not just the pushing the information, but now they're pulling it, and that can be super helpful. But, we have to do more of those kinds of things where we're talking to a broader audience.
Yeah, and what I think we need more, let's say, like you did today, so you brought parts.
Oh.
Don't get me wrong, sometimes you need to touch it. Same probably with a visit in the factory, You get the parts in the hand, and everything that you said was not only about functionality, that's the one part, It was all logical. And even someone with no technical background can understand directly, this is how we should do it,
Sure.
So we need more of these stories. Christian, so if it comes to education, the students come to you, and so you teach them how to do that, okay? So are they sometimes asking what is the sustainability aspect about it, or is that something that is not that? Are they more into the technology part, or is it an aspect that is combined or attached?
Yeah, let's say it is to a certain extent combined, but they look at it in a different way than maybe the generation 10 years ago. Definitely. They do look at it from a different perspective. Maybe they are not directly coming in the way that it needs to be sustainable or whatever. But they are asking more questions about it. This is what I really see, and maybe look at it from different perspectives. And actually, today, many of the technical students, they already have a background in 3D printing, because many of them have those small 3D hobby printers at home. Those small makers, and they changed a lot, because in the past, people studying in our technical field, they were coming from lying under a car and working on it in a certain way, and today they come with small printed parts. So there is, let's say, a visibility of 3D printing for them, and we can use that. I'm pretty sure that the new generation coming into the industry has much more knowledge about 3D printing just because they bring this. Sustainability is an issue, but it's not the most important one when I look at the technical students.
Absolutely.
That's definitely the case.
This brings me to you, Marcus, again, because, we don't have a similar background, but we're coming from a, let's call it, traditional industry, okay, in a very positive way, but it's very traditional. It's not only the young students. In our age, we do need to do the mind shift as well, because as we discussed in our skills and talents panel, we have a lot of elder people, or elder in terms of, I would consider myself elder, so over 40, let's put it over 40, okay? So not the 8 years old. So so how to change those mindset? You did it. What was your motivation? Or event or experience? You're working now in the field of additive manufacturing. I've seen some of your, let's say, success stories that you present on the RISE homepage, where you're mentioned, but you are coming from the total different world. What made you change your mind? Don't get me wrong. I hope it's not too personal.
Well, actually, it was when I was working with the Lean, and then the idea was to use connectivity to bring Lean into the transport and logistic industry. And then the waste in Lean.
Yeah.
And one of them is
Tim Wood.
Transport.
Yeah.
So that was epiphany for me. So that was So then I realized that we need to do something. But then I took a detour in the manufacturing industry with metal cutting in order to learn the basics. And then 3 years ago I started then with RISE to pursue this question: how would 3D printing change logistic transport and our industrial system? And coming then to the last part there, the change of the industrial system, here we have, in this discussion, we've been talking a lot about the supply chain, but then also we have a demand chain also.
Yeah.
So if you can start to decrease the demand, meaning that, for example, having more durable products, then of course that will slow down the pace and the supply that you need. And of course it will also slow down how much you need from the earth. So being able to keep something alive in the use phase for a longer period of time is an area which I see that AM is a great enabler, because what will happen if you start to slow down the demand is that the volumes are decreasing, and what happens then with factories which are built on mass production? So these are research questions, so that's why I transcended into research in order to be able to work with them, because
that's a fantastic perspective, but brings me to another question, Sini, probably for you. Let's say I'm cutting demand chain because I don't need it anymore, because parts have a longer duration of being able to work, okay? On the other side, I reduce the supply chain. There are so many losers included. That's a little bit my problem, you know? One of the things is convince management. The other one is to prevent too many enemies because they know that they can't survive it. I mean, remember, we have so many examples in business where companies didn't survive because they were cut off due to technology innovation, and this would be the one. Are there the members where you see their lack of slowing down the process?
Well, our members are AM enthusiasts.
Okay.
Perhaps not that perspective, but I can say that of course the business is not that huge at the moment. So I'm not seeing that as a threat at the moment, but in the forthcoming years perhaps, but we are not there yet, I would say, at least in the Nordic countries. I'm not sure if you are having different kind of situation. What do you think, Sherry?
Yeah,
how do you see it?
Yeah, you know, I think that's always the way with innovation and technology, right? There's always going to be some things that are not needed anymore, whether it's the same volume or the same things. And how you navigate, that's always going to be challenging. And there's going to be winners and losers in all of that. I think, you know, we do hear a lot when we're talking about like universities, we say, you know, what is the engineering department doing to have more about additive manufacturing? I'd say, what is the business school doing? How are we working to get additive manufacturing into the business school? I'm working with a university right now, my alma mater, where I got my MBA, and said, hey, I want to look at how does this impact supply chains? And they were like, tell us more about this. They knew almost nothing about this. And so, you know, if we want those people that are in finance and in sustainability and distribution and supply chains and all of that, we can't wait for the engineering department at Volvo to tell all the rest of the company. You know, they're trying to push a rock up a hill internally. We need to be able to help educate the people in these other functions about what these capabilities are. They don't have to know all the technical capabilities. You tell them kind of what it is, but what this can do to impact their area, and suddenly they're very interested and looking at more of that. So, you know, change is always difficult, and you know, there will always be winners and losers in that. So,
but considering the current situation, Sherry, and we don't need to focus on the US, but also it's the same situation as with us. So we're looking into an economic crisis. I mean, it won't be tremendous. I don't know. We will see. Yeah, but it's getting harder now to convince people in this topic, won't you think? Or could it be
around sustainability?
Yeah.
Well, that's why I think you can't just talk about it as sustainability, because you're right. In the U.S., we're not going to hear the words global change for 4 years now. But when you talk about resource efficiency and running your business efficiently, and you know, the U.S. may not be, and I'm just generalizing about the U.S., they may not care about sustainability, but they certainly are concerned about the fact that titanium is all coming from China or Russia. So, you know, there are other factors that are very important. And so, you know, how you talk about this, and, you know, like I said, you know, for me, using the terms resource efficiency, we can call it whatever you want. We can call it sustainability. We can call it resource efficiency. It's really all the same thing. But, you know, knowing how to talk about this to the right people really matters. Like, I went to a supply chain conference just to hear what these people talk about. What are their pain points? What's the terminology they use? Just like those military people don't talk sustainability, they talk sustainment, which is a slightly different thing, but kind of the same. You know, and being able to talk to those other groups, what are their pain points? How can we help them, instead of saying, I've got a solution to a problem you maybe don't even have. It's like, find out what are their pain points, how can we address it, how can we, you know, what language do we need to use with them, and how can we make progress in that way and educate those folks about what, you know, these amazing capabilities in this building, but we can't wait for them to show up at Formnext. We've got to go to them.
For sure not. So we have 3.5 minutes left. What I want to end the session with, I haven't done it for a long time. Give me 1 or 2 words, Sini. You want to start? No. Now give me 1 or 2 words. What do you think has to be done in order to push further sustainability with, not in, with additive manufacturing? Just 2, 3 words.
I could say that we need facts. And also I would highlight that quite often I think if it's a business case, so environmental and economical sustainability, we are building those hand in hand. So there are any constraints in that.
Very good.
Yeah, when I was a kid, it was 4 billion people on the Earth. I looked it up today. It's 8 billions today during my life, and you see how young I am. So thinking of that development, which is hard facts, and then you draw the line, and then, so are we going to be 16 billions? And how much resources are all these people going to consume? So I would say that virgin materials should be super expensive.
Yeah.
Because if it's expensive to get virgin material, what will happen then? Then will you start to reuse. Yeah. And then, as we said here, then keeping something alive decrease the demand for virgin material. So.
Very good. Christian.
I think fact-based and holistic cases that really show that sustainability is something we don't need to do to being more sustainable, but to also being more economic in the end. I think this is really the fact that we see now. And I agree with you that we don't yet have enough of those cases, but we need to have them in order to show them and convince people in the whole supply chain.
Yeah, very good.
And I absolutely agree. We need more accurate data for all the vendors in these buildings. They need to be able to provide data so that we can get good analysis. But we need more complete business case studies, not just the part, but looking at the impacts across the entire business. And the more we can put those out, I think will be valuable for everyone.
Oh, that's a majority. I like that very much, because this brings me to my closing words. Thank you so much, the 4 of you. Very fruitful, vivid discussion. I loved it, to be honest. My favorite one so far. Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure. And for you, the audience at the live stream, here comes an economic hint, okay? And that's the key takeaway out of this panel discussions. Go and make LCAs. Go and make and find the real cases where we can present it to your customers, to your suppliers, to you yourself, to your management, in order to push the topic, and basically not only doing something for the environment, but also doing something for your resources, because that's what it's all about, because they are limited. So it was a pleasure to have you. You will get another few minutes of highlights to enjoy, and afterwards we're coming to a real highlight of our fair. This will be, this will be our Formnext Awards celebration. So stay tuned, wait another few minutes, and then we are back here with a ceremony of giving the awards away. Thank you so much. Stay tuned.